Bottom line is, I'm higher on the Browns this year than I've been in a long, long time. So I think they could surprise people, and I think they could surprise in their own division. I think they've got a really good shot at beating Cincinnati and Baltimore on a regular basis throughout the season. I'm not so sure they're going to match up with Pittsburgh, and they've got some other out-of-division games that are pretty tough on their schedule. They'll probably beat my Jets a time or two. But, you've got Oakland and the Chargers. You've got Kansas City, Atlanta. There's just teams they're going to still struggle against unless they just come out and surprise everybody.
I think you have to like the direction that they're heading because they actually seem to have a direction. You started to look at their quarterback position and what they've done the last few years, messing around with Deshaun Kaiser. His own coach came out in college and said he wasn't ready for it yet. Why they thought he was going to be ready last year to just step into that role and start for them just shows how desperate they were for a quarterback at that point. So at least now they went out, they got a veteran guy in Tyrod Taylor. They went out and got themselves a consistent wide receiver in Jarvis Landry, a guy to lead that room. And if you watched Hard Knocks episode 1, you saw him go on a tantrum in the wide receiver room trying to get guys out there and get them to play and get them really just change the culture of this team. And that's really what they needed. And I think Baker Mayfield's probably the guy that can change their culture quicker than any of the other guys. Sam Darnold seems like just more of a quiet guy, a lower risk guy that I think was a great pick for the Jets. But I think for the Browns, they needed a guy to come in and sort of re-energize and revitalize this franchise and give their fan base something to look forward to. And like you said, defensively, they should be better. They went out, they ended Denzel Ward in the draft. They got Demarius Randall in the Kaiser trade from the Packers, so they shored up the secondary, which wasn't very good last year. You'd have to think Myles Garrett should be better this year, having another year into the league. You start to look at offensively. You talked about the running backs. Des Bryant is coming in on Thursday, the day the pod drops. He'll be in Cleveland. I'm sure that'll be on Hard Knocks next week, his visit to the Browns. Josh Gordon could very well be back for them soon once he gets out of his rehab stint. You add in the guy that had the most receptions in the league last year in Jarvis Landry. So they've added pieces to this team. They seem like they're in the right direction. I think if you're a Browns fan, you have to at least be happy that there's direction there. They had conviction to go out and draft Baker Mayfield. And we talked about that on the show that, look, if they watch the tape and they feel like he's the guy and that's the consensus of the room, then the media and fans be damned. You got to go get the guy that you feel is the best for your franchise. They did that. And at least if it doesn't work, they can feel comfortable in that decision that they'll go down with the ship with the guy that they wanted. So from that point, I like what they've done. I hope they pump the brakes a little bit on all the preseason stuff in game one. Again, Mayfield was 11 for 20. That's only 55%. And his big play came on what could have easily been a ball that was batted down by the corner if he was a split second sooner that turned into a huge touchdown. That would have made Baker's stats look completely different. So, yes, he looked good, and he didn't go out and bomb. He didn't do what, as a Broncos fan, what Paxton Lynch has done for the last 3 seasons in preseason. He looked like he was competent, he looked confident, and he looked like he knew what he was doing, and he looked like the number 1 pick. So from that standpoint, yes, Browns fans should be happy, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. Again, go back and listen to what we talked about with the Jets. There's no reason to rush this guy out. You're not a playoff team this year. Just take your time and develop him and let him be the guy for the next decade for you. Don't ruin him right now. Again, this team needs to rebuild their culture. 0-16 last year, Eric. 1-31 the last 2 seasons. This team has to find a way to start winning games. Vegas has them at 5.5. Do you like the over or under on that?
I might surprise you here again, Justin. I'm going to take the over, just barely. I'm looking at their schedule. I think they've got 5 wins in the books. And this is a team that if their defense comes out, plays really hard against some of these teams that are also on the fringe of like that 7-9 or 8-8 area. You know, you're talking about Baltimore. You're talking about Cincinnati. You're even talking about Miami. You're talking about a team like Tampa Bay. You're talking about a team like Indianapolis. There's going to be spaces in there where the Browns will win games. And so I feel like they're going to win 5, and therefore I feel like they win another 1 or 2, possibly even 3 in some of those one-possession games. To me, that gives them the over.
I think I'm going under still. I think 5-11 will be their max for them. Again, they were 0-16, so if they can find a way to win 5 games, that's a massive upgrade for this team. I just don't know what they're going to get out of Tyrod early on. And then I think when they go to Baker it could be a struggle to get going. I think they'll be much better the last 8 games of the year than the first 8. I definitely think they will be in more games, though. They're going to be a much more competitive team. They're not going to just be a cakewalk and a walkover on the schedule. You're going to have to come in and play them hard. And I see a lot of what we saw from the Jets last year. Just a team that plays hard every single week. And I hope that that's what they get rid of. You talk about last year, that game they had against Pittsburgh to actually try to win a game. Coleman lets the ball go through his hands. It was just a microcosm of their season, just a chance to do something, and they just blew it. They have to have a huge culture change first, and until I see it, if I was putting money on it, I'm going to go the under on them. Let's kick it over to the Cincinnati Bengals. Eric, this is year 16 for Marvin Lewis. He's had 7 playoff appearances and 0 playoff wins. I don't know what this guy has on Bengals ownership, but for some reason they really like this guy, even though he hasn't really performed that well for them. They're coming off a 7-9 season last year. So for this team, is it playoffs or bust for Marvin Lewis? And if they don't make the playoffs, do they need to make a coaching change on this team?
I don't know how to answer that, Justin. Playoffs or bust. The guy that's in his 16th year, been 16 years, and doesn't have a playoff win. How can you say it's playoffs or bust? I mean, clearly he could probably go 4-12 and still keep his job. Yeah, I don't
That
really
should make
know.
you happy, Bengals fans.
Yeah, so this team, and I got bad news for you, Bengals fans. I think you're going to finish last in this division. I really do. And that's me because giving the Browns 5 to 6 to 7 wins, I think a couple of those wins come against those Bengals. And then the Bengals just aren't going to do enough. Now, Joe Mixon is probably the best player now on that team outside of what they've got going with A.J. Green at wide receiver. But Andy Dalton, he just hasn't shown enough year in and year out. He's going to throw some spectacular games, and he's going to throw some bombs. So I just think that for Marvin Lewis, Andy Dalton, and that team, you're going to see a shakeup after this year if they can't make the playoffs. And, Justin, I don't think they will.
It's going to run out for them. At some point, they're going to have to make a change, a culture change. If fans stop showing up, if there's enough backlash on this team, especially now with as prevalent as social media is and the way that fans can basically make statements to their team and to ownership, and a lot of times it's simply not going to games. That seems to get ownership's attention more than anything, is that they're going to have to do something to shake up this team and really try to make a difference on them. At least with this team, though, you still have A.J. Green. If he stays healthy, he's still a top 10 receiver in the league. I agree with you on Dalton. He's just a guy he's just a guy. He's just a competent quarterback. He's not a top 15 guy. He has those 4 or 5 really good games a year, and then he has 4 or 5 duds in there where you just think, how is this guy, how did they just stick with this guy in there? To me, this team really revolves around, can Joe Mixon stay healthy? Can John Ross actually contribute on this team? And can Tyler Eifert stay on the field for more than 1 game in a row? That man's a walking mash unit. He got hurt in a Pro Bowl, Eric, with a serious ankle injury. Like, that doesn't seem to happen to anybody. And for this guy, it did. So this is another team that's very dependent on their players to stay healthy. A.J. Green has to stay on the field for them. Joe Mixon's going to have to find a way to stay on the field for them. They don't have that rash of running backs with Jeremy Hill and all these other guys. It's basically going to be mixed in with Gio Bernard. That's going to be their 2 guys. And Mixon's looked really good in the preseason, supposedly having a great camp. So to me, it's, can they get John Ross onto the field? Can he be a difference maker? Can he really stretch the field for them and give them a different component and a different look to their offense? Because if that doesn't happen, I agree with you. They're going to be another year where this team does nothing. They miss the playoffs, and then the Bengals are going to have some very difficult decisions to make. Vegas has them at 6.5. Over or under 6.5 for the Bengals?
Not a chance. I'm taking the under. Justin, they could open up their season in a massive hole. They got to travel to Indianapolis for game 1. You've got to figure that if Andrew Luck is healthy and starts that game at home in Indy, that he's going to be extremely, extremely motivated. So you've got that. Then they've got a home game against Baltimore, but I think of the 2, even though it's just about a coin flip, Baltimore is going to be the better team. Then they've got to go to at Carolina and at Atlanta. I think they open this season 0-4, Justin. Then they might get a win against Miami, but then they're going to lose to Pittsburgh. They're probably going to lose when they travel to Kansas City. Maybe a coin flip in Tampa Bay. They're going to go into their bye with probably 2 wins. So the heck with Marvin Lewis being fired at the end of the year. This could be a situation where halfway through the year after their bye, it's complete panic mode because when they get back from the bye, they've got New Orleans, they're at Baltimore, they've got Denver, they've got the Chargers, they've got Oakland. Justin, I'm sorry, I don't see a whole lot of wins. I got to take the under.
No, listen to that schedule. I got to agree. I can't see them winning over 6 games, and maybe I should have changed the question to, does Marvin Lewis make it through the season at this point? Because, yeah, you have to start thinking about what's the future of this team. And this is a team that even if you talked about their first part of their schedule, even if they struggle, there's not a backup sitting there like some of these other teams we've talked about where you can go put in a Sam Darnold or you have Baker Mayfield sitting there. There's really nothing behind Andy Dalton to put in. Matt Barkley, he's proven that he's not the answer to any question in this league. That's not a guy that you're going to turn this team over to, and there's really no one else. So you're going to have to just struggle out the rest of the year and then make a decision next year in either free agency or in the draft on what to do. But yeah, this is a team, I think that they're just at a point where they need to win, and the schedule just doesn't match up for them this year where I think they're going to have a very successful year. All right, let's talk about another team in the Baltimore Ravens, another team that seems to be stuck in that mediocrity type of feel. We talked about this team last year. We didn't know how they were going to get to 9 wins. Somehow they found a way to get there. But when I think about the Baltimore Ravens, Eric, nothing seems to stick out. They might be the least. They just don't have anything on this team. It feels like over the years, once Ed Reed left and Ray Lewis left and now Suggs is on the backside of his career, they just lost their identity. They spent so much money on Flacco, even 4 and 5 years ago when the cap wasn't nearly what it is now. They lost so many players that they're good enough that they're going to constantly be in that mix to win 7 or 8 games, be in the potential for a wild card berth, but they're always going to be stuck in those middle rounds of the draft where you just don't want to be in the NFL. They went out this past draft. They caught Lamar Jackson at the end of the first round, but he has not looked very well in their first 2 games, in the Hall of Fame game and preseason game number 1. But Eric, when does this team start to look past Joe Flacco and start to think about their future?
I think they thought they were doing that when they drafted Lamar Jackson. Now, I think it's still early for a guy like him. His playing style is not going to be one of those styles that looks good in every game. I'm sorry, it's just not. I mean, Michael Vick was a quarterback that I really enjoyed watching play, but he also laid some big duds out there too. So you've got a guy like Lamar Jackson, and he's going to make some huge mistakes, especially early on. But the problem with what Baltimore did is that going out and drafting a quarterback when there was certainly other players available at that point in the draft, it says to Joe Flacco that we've got a hint of doubt about you and your future with this organization. And the problem with that, with a team like Baltimore and a city like Baltimore, is that when you start losing, you know the chants are going to come. They want to see Lamar. They want to see Lamar. And even if he goes out there and he's not very good for a while, but he's flashy and something different and something exciting, it at least gives them hope that there can be some phenomenal performances that arise out of Lamar Jackson. I just think there's going to be doubt all throughout the season that's going to kill their momentum. I think Collins is going to turn into a great running back this year if he stays healthy. I think he's going to go into sort of a beast mode like a Marshawn Lynch, and he's going to drive that offense. But like you said, name me 5 other offensive names on that team. I can't do it. Name me 5 other defensive superstars on that team. Name me 2. I can't do it. So this is sort of a just also ran team in that division. I think they're going to be clearly forgotten with how good Pittsburgh, I think, will be, how bad Cincinnati will be, and then how much the Browns, I think, are going to challenge for the middle of that division. Baltimore is going to have to kind of put up or shut up, and Flacco could be on the hot seat.
I think the one thing, hopefully, that it will do for, if you're a Ravens fan, is that by drafting Lamar Jackson, maybe it will actually push Flacco for the first time in his career. He's never really been challenged on this team. He was brought in as a first-round pick. They never really had anybody that pushed him, and he's sort of just been the guy there. And they've just kind of had a revolving door behind him, Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Mallett, some of those type of guys that were never going to challenge him. At least now it seems like talk coming out of camp was he really looked good and really was basically trying to elevate himself. Almost what we saw with Alex Smith last year, where all of a sudden Alex Smith came out and looked like a different quarterback because all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes is breathing down his neck, and now Alex Smith is throwing the ball deep ball better than he had in his entire career and with more frequency. So I think if you're a Ravens fan, you have to hope that that's the key, that just having Lamar Jackson there in his presence and that possibility is going to push Flacco maybe for the first time in his career as a Raven. And then for Lamar Jackson, I think like you said, it's hard to plug him in. They're going to have to completely change that offense, similar to what you've seen with a lot of these guys that are that running gun